Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to the Common Good Podcast. It's August 23rd. Man alive, I've had a lot to get done in August, Dan. It feels like it's drifting through my fingers or drifting away.
Sand through the hourglass.
Yeah, boy. So it's already the 23rd of August. Hope you all having a great day. Depends on where you live, I guess. We're going to do a little highlight of the news today. I'm in Minneapolis. Dan in South Bend, Indiana. I'd love to know where you're from, of course. So please let us know where you're listening from. Both the I guess, your state, city, country, but also where in your place. Like I'm in my basement, in my studio, which, by the way, you can't see it if you're watching on the video here, but the floor is full of stuff right now as we get ready for the We the People ride around the country as I dig out cords and batteries and mounts for cameras and biking things. We're going to be documenting our tour along the border and seeing all kinds of things. So some point here, starting in September 10th, 11th, 12th, you're going to start hearing updates, not from just Minneapolis, South Bend, Indiana, where else? Decatur, where one of our co-hosts are from, outside of Arkansas, in Chicago, in Atlanta. I mean, we have people on this podcast from all over the country. You're going to start hearing about it from down at the border. But today we're going to do a little news roundup. I like to do that on Mondays. And Dan, our topics today include, weather, a whole new version of FOMO, what we've learned about the Pfizer vaccine now, big update on the Pfizer vaccine.
Yeah.
Pfizer biotech. Armed protesters being more dangerous than ever. That should be a news story. What's going on, of course, over in Afghanistan and how the Biden administration is choosing to respond to that. I don't know why I do this to myself. I must just like the punishment. But Matt Gaetz, congressman and insurrectionist leader, little updates,
accused sex trafficker and pedophile.
That guy, the guy who traffics in child pornography and then riles up people to try to stop child pornography. It's really something.
You just can't make
Matt
it up.
Gaetz from Florida.
That guy.
And then of course the big controversy of this summer. What are we going to do about our Jeopardy hosts?
They just cannot. Yeah, they can't figure this out.
Yes, and more people seem to care about that than all the other news items we just mentioned. So let's start with the skies. I use the Apple news feed, and so this is a screenshot. If you're watching in the video from my phone this morning. This is in just three little stories sitting together. Crews work to restore power after thousands are drenched in Henri. If you're looking at the spelling of it, you might think it's Henry. Henri hurricane that became a big storm. Devastating scenes of 22 people dying and another 20 missing in Tennessee because of floods and California burning. Just in one glance at my phone, it was three major weather happenings, and this summer has just been all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have fires near where you live, Dan?
We don't have. Well, I looked it up. We apparently do have some forest fires. They're not anywhere on the scale as out west, so we're actually getting smoke from the fires out west, and it's impacting our air quality even as far as Indiana and Michigan. So.
This is where you're reminded about the interconnectedness of our weather, right? It's just really something. Here in Minnesota, the northern part of our state is borders the southern part of Canada, and they call that the boundary waters.
Yeah.
Down on the southern border of our country, they call it the borderlands. That's where we're going to be doing our ride along the wall. When you go north up to the boundary waters, there's just a boundary. No fence, no wall, no armed guards, none of that. All this nonsense that you can't have a country unless you have armed guards on your border. Not true. I live in a border state and we don't have them, but they call it the boundary waters, and it's a wilderness space up there. Canoeing, they don't allow you to have motorboats in parts of the boundary waters. The great part of it, people just canoe and camp. They had to go in this weekend and evacuate people because there's a bunch of fires up there that got out of control. We have a big drought going on here in Minnesota. And they had to go in and pull these people out. Well, not pull them out, notify them. Because once someone gets their permit, people tend to go up to the boundary waters and go camping in their canoes and find little campsites. And they don't want to be in touch with anyone. They're not watching the news.
Off the grid. They're
off the grid. And they're like, there's forest fires burning through, and they're nervous that people are going to start more of them. So they're evacuating people, coming in with float planes, people in canoes, running around having to notify people. All of this just sort of happening. Now, I was speaking to a friend in Arizona who lives in the desert, and she said, this has been an unbelievable summer here because it has rained so much and everything is so green. We were out there a few weeks
Really?
ago driving through, driving from San Diego to El Paso, and the colors were spectacular. Things that people in the area had been saying, we haven't seen it like this in a long time. Sometimes we get this in September, but there's been so much rain that the desert is brightening up. Now it's still, 90% desert, but boy, when that desert comes alive with some growth, oh, it is spectacular.
Yeah. So too much rain where you don't usually have it, and not enough rain where you need it.
It's like economics and food insecurities. It's not that we don't have enough. It's not that we don't have enough money, not that we don't have enough food, not that we don't have enough shelter, not that we don't have enough resources. It's a distribution problem.
Yeah, getting it where it needs to be.
Yeah. I feel that way about my body when I look at myself in a full-length mirror without any clothes on. Like I got too little up on my arms and I got too much down on my back hips. It's just a distribution problem. If I spread all that out,
distribution problem here.
I'd probably look a little better. But it wasn't that way. So I feel that too. I guess the human experience and the weather experience, they're fractals, right? Just sort of repeating each other. But hey, really a big deal. This the hurricane they thought was going to hit the Northeast, I guess didn't turn out to be as bad as it could have been, but there were some real worries about it. Did you know there was a big concert in Central Park this weekend? The Welcome Back to New York City concert.
Mm.
Did you follow this at all?
No.
You know this was even going on. It was on CNN. I knew about it because I watched too much CNN. So I knew the concert was coming, and all kinds of people from Barry Manilow to Santana, popular people now that I don't know, Bruce Springsteen, like 5, 6, 7 hours of music and people doing 3, 4 songs on the same stage, kind of big.
Wow.
Thing. Got called off right in the middle of Barry Manilow's set. Truly, right in the middle of Barry Manilow. The guy comes out, walks up on the stage, goes up to the musicians behind Barry Manilow, starts waving his arms side to side, like cut, stop.
What?
They cut the sound while Barry Manilow is singing. They cut the sound and say, because of weather, you need to leave the park in a brisk but safe manner. And people just turned and just took off.
Really? Wow.
Like people in New York, when someone says there's an emergency and you need to get out of this space, they got out of that space. There was a small group that stayed thinking that maybe the concert would come back on, 100 people or something, kind of hung around for 3 hours in the rain, thinking that maybe.
And we'll be front row when they turn the sound back on.
We were stuck in the back before, but now we're sneaking up. So that thing got canceled. But apparently the weather wasn't so bad. But just the fact that this is, these are 10-year, 15, 50-year kind of occurrences where you get hurricanes up that far north. So just crazy weather stuff, which, weather and climate are not always the same, but sometimes they impact one another. Mm-hmm. Right. So when our climate changes, our weather's going to change. Now you get weather fluctuations that aren't about climate change. There's always a range, and there's been hotter days, at certain other periods of time, but there is significant change happening in our ecosystem all over the world, and it shows up in all of these places. With floods in some spot, and then some people gets a little, I don't know, they get a little like, hey, maybe this climate change is good for us in Minnesota. I could use warmer winters, that kind of thing, or I kind of like a rainy desert. That would be all right. So I guess some people think maybe it's not going to be that big a deal, but it's climate change is so devastating to the planet. It's big deal. And
like Michigan, my home state, for all the projections, is a great place to be amidst all the climate change, rising sea levels, water shortages, etc. But as things get worse in other areas, you're going to have more climate refugees deciding to move to places like Michigan or Minnesota, and
Arizona, Texas.
Yep.
We're going to be all moving around. What that's going to create is what people are experiencing now because of COVID, which is a whole new version of FOMO. I'm not big into abbreviations. Like, I think, even if you need something as soon as possible, just take the time to say it all out. You don't have to ASAP that thing. You got time. Settle down. Breathe it out. I
Say
pick
the
on
whole word.
I pick on abbreviations all the time. Guac, just it's so tasty. Give it its due. Call it guacamole.
Give it the respect it deserves.
Cucumbers. Let's just keep with the cucumbers.
Wait, do people
I,
abbreviate cucumbers?
oh, they abbreviate cucumbers, my friend. Cukes.
No.
Uh huh. Uh huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, I might live with someone who's a fan of
Uh,
abbreviation. She might abbreviate things that don't often get all the other normal
oh, that's funny.
abbreviations. Yeah, but FOMO, the fear of missing out. Maybe you know that one already. Maybe that one. This little abbreviation. And I guess these little acronyms. No, they're not acronyms. These little short, like ASAP, is different than just shortening a word to guac and cukes and all the rest. But anyway, when you use the fear of missing out, that was a big thing. A lot of people sense that because of social media. All of a sudden they found out their friends are doing a lot of things they're not doing, or even worse, their friends aren't really doing that much more, but they just found a way to talk about those three things they did last month, and it seemed like they're doing a lot. Well, now there's a new one, FOGO. That's apparently the fear of going out, which the pandemic has caused, but also maybe some of this weather stuff. Just all the uncertainty of whatever's going on out there, viruses
Hmm.
to weather, to insurrectionists. It just makes somebody
Yeah.
unsure of going out of the house.
Maybe we'll stay in today.
We'll
Just
just hunker
stay away.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a lot of people I know who are that way just because of COVID. They're just looking around. They're like, well, I don't know. I'm just gonna stay here. Some people got really ambitious during COVID, like they bought bicycles and got out, or they picked up new habits, or they
Decided to
started,
ride across the whole country, and
yeah, got all nutty.
some people got real wild with it.
And some people just said, like, I'm just going to get a new comforter from a couch and settle in. And I'm not sure those people didn't actually figure it out. But there's a
Get a
there's a
weighted
third one. So there's
blanket and an air fryer.
a weighted blanket. Do you use the weighted blanket?
No.
I know a
Sounds
lot of
nice.
people who do. Yeah, they're real heavy ones. They feel real sense. So I know people who sleep with them. I want to sleep with the lightest thing on my body as possible. Some people really like to snuggle under a big heavy thing. What about you, Dan? How do you sleep?
I like it very cold so that I can have a big old blanket on top.
Oh,
Yeah.
you like the big old blanket? Yeah.
Yep.
We should ask people listening too. I'm wondering about Jim Eaton and Barbara Ashley. I see that they're making comments. I wonder how they
Love
like
to see
sleep.
him weigh in. Yeah.
Yeah, light. Do you go light and feathery on top? Maybe sometimes even with nothing. Some people like it heavy, chill it down to give yourself some weight. Some people like to tuck in their sheets
No,
and blankets
absolutely
at the
not.
end of their beds. Ooh,
No way.
I might live with someone who likes that. So we have a very clear dividing line in the middle of our bed as to where but then I am told that I'm responsible to make the bed look nice if I'm not going to have the sheets tucked in at the end, which barely seems worth it. Because nobody goes in our room. I don't know, like nobody. It's just us.
No one's inspecting. Yeah.
Florin goes with a light cover. I appreciate that, Florin. I'm with you. We'll just say this is how we're going to start dividing people up. Do you sleep heavy? Do you sleep light with whatever's on top of you? All right. So lots of things going on there. So if you feel like you're just missing out, maybe instead pick up a good case of FOGO, fear of going out. Maybe that's the option, or the fear of normal.
Phono.
Which, is, I guess, normal, and I guess you get the fear of normal is this sort of a cheeky way that people are saying that they're just worried that maybe things, when they get back to normal, they're not going to know how to respond. What's it going to be like? And I have felt that with myself, and I know other people have felt it too. Like, hey, we're going to go to this thing with these people. Like, what do we do?
Yeah.
You have to say to people like, hey, do you shake hands? Do you hug? I don't even know what normal is anymore. And you get a little anxiety just about what normal is.
And what do we talk about? Like, because even the question like, hey, how have you been is such a loaded question now. It's like, well, how real do you want to get? How fast? Like,
Yes.
because it's been a year.
That's right. You start into that, start down that road. And frankly, I just wish we would remove from our general greetings the question asking form of a greeting. Like just say to someone hello or nice to see you or I hope you're well. This
Salutations.
this questioning of people. So how you been? What's going on?
Hey, geez,
Like,
easy
geez,
there.
hey, mind your own business. What's it to you? Somebody say something? Why? Why do you ask
What do
that?
you
Do I
know?
not look good? Do I not look healthy? But there is this sense of of people fearing that of what normal is, or we're going to get back to normal. Yesterday, I was having this conversation with some folks in my family. We were saying because tried to go to a Chipotle and tried to go to Whole Foods and tried to go to a Noodles. They're all in the same parking lot, and some people were going to get food from Whole Foods. Some
Okay.
of us were going to get it from Chipotle, some from Noodles, and we're going to sit on
Sounds complicated.
a little patio outside and eat. Well, the Chipotle isn't even open for restaurants. You have to order through the app and then walk in and pick it up. You can't even walk in the restaurant and order it.
Mm-hmm.
The restaurant's closed for seating and all of this. The Noodles has a sign on the front that just says low staff, 15 to 20-minute wait, standard, like a handwritten sign, like don't even come in here unless you know
Scribbled
it's
in
going to be
crayon.
15 to 20 minutes. You go over to Whole Foods, they're mostly out of things. My daughter starts talking about going to Target, and a third of the things she looks for are gone. You can't, there's things that, people are saying all the time, like we got big backups, we can't find servers, we can't find workers. This COVID thing has really changed the dynamics.
Yeah.
Where I realized I just lived in the sort of oblivious privilege that pretty much anything that's available would always be available.
Mm-hmm.
And when places were open, it was all going to work. And there was just most of my interactions out in the world were not complicated. Now it is just a wonder. Like every day you go out and you're like, I don't know, are they open? Do they have, can you order things? Are they going to have it at the store? Can I get this thing? I spend an awful lot of time just thinking through that kind of new normal. And I've realized, and sure, of course, it's just some level of privilege, but I've been developing up this habit for 54 years that like in the United States, stuff's just kind of available and around.
Yeah.
And now no, it's not. And that is an odd kind of normal.
It is, yeah. And part of it, I feel like, is we could have been at least done with the pandemic portion of this and gone back to some sort of new normal different than this. But we're still struggling just to get out of pandemic mode and defeat this Delta variant. And headlines like this next one kind of answer why that might be. The FDA had to come out and tell people via Twitter, this is the official U.S. FDA Twitter account, and the headline is, "You are not a horse, you are not a cow. Seriously, y'all, stop it." Because people, instead of taking the vaccine, instead of taking approved drugs, they're taking medicine meant for horses and cows and injecting themselves with it and ingesting it in the hopes of curing or preventing COVID.
Ivermectin is the name of the deworming medicine that's often used for cows and horses that people on Fox News, Laura Ingraham, I heard her say it, Sean Hannity, he was pitching it, Tucker Carlson, they're all saying things like there's alternatives to getting the vaccine that you may not want to get. You should take, hydroxychloroquine or whatever that is. And this deworm. Here's what I don't understand is if someone's unnerved about COVID to the point that they want to take something to deal with the ramifications, symptoms of COVID, why are you going with the least tested version versus the vaccine that 200 million people just in the United States have tried? This is the piece that's really confusing to me is that like if they're just COVID deniers, which I know a lot of people who are, more and more of them every day. I swear I meet more people in my life every day who are like, no, I'm not really doing this thing. I don't think COVID's that big a deal. Like, it's not that they don't even believe vaccines. These are people that just still don't think COVID's all that big of a deal. They're just like, just factor it in. It's fine. Just move on, everybody. It's really something. So if you're in that camp, you're probably not out like taking horse deworming pills. But if you are taking horse deworming pills, it's because you're worried about COVID, that you'll go to your veterinarian or your feed store and try to come up with something. then why won't you use the thing that
Oh my
we
gosh.
know works?
Yeah. Well, we
Just
don't know what's in that, Doug. We don't know what's in the vaccine. So I'm going to take this.
Uh,
I just,
my horses have done well with the Invectum Merton all this time, and I'm
look,
just going to stick.
0
I'm just going to
horses have
stick with
died of
what I know.
COVID. So,
Apparently, they found COVID now in deer. Did you hear this?
no.
Yeah, in deer.
Oh, boy.
So not in the deer meat. Apparently, they want to make a big deal about that. You can still
Okay.
eat venison, but in the respiratory systems of deer. So
That's weird.
maybe they should give them some of this intervectum.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is something. Well, on the good news side for COVID, the Pfizer biotech vaccine, as of I guess this morning, just minutes ago,
Yeah.
has received full FDA approval. The Food and Drug Administration has now said we've done all the things we need to do to certify that the biotech Pfizer vaccine, that one, and I think this is going to happen for Moderna and even J&J, but for
Mm-hmm.
that one, they have now said it is as approved as everything else. A lot of people may not have even remembered that we were using the vaccine, the Pfizer, Moderna, the Pfizer biotech vaccine, and Moderna and J&J under a emergency use authorization. And
Right.
there are people who are so confident in the FDA that they were not going to take the vaccine until the FDA looked in all the ways that the FDA knows how to look at these issues. Now, I think that's a small number of people who haven't taken the vaccine because they're so committed to the FDA process that they wanted to wait for the FDA to say it's A-OK, not on emergency use, but after the full battery of examinations.
Mm-hmm.
Most people I know that are not taking the vaccine are like, I don't trust the FDA. I don't trust the government. I don't trust the Pfizer people. I don't trust any of those people when it comes to vaccines. So for many, many people, I don't think that the FDA has approved it. It's going to be a changer, but there will be some.
Yeah. And it seems
when
like one less arrow in the quiver for people that are against the vaccine.
That's right. I have a friend who works for a big, I won't say the airline, but a big airline that's headquartered here in Minneapolis and in Atlanta, and it's blue and red, and sometimes it's called Delta. So they have not been willing to mandate that their employees get the vaccine because it was operating under a temporary use. So the question will be, will companies like that, big corporations like that, now feel more confident in saying to their employees, to work here, you have to, especially if you're in a front-facing or customer-facing role, you have to have the vaccine. And now that it has FDA approval, we feel more confident in making that a requirement than we did when it was under an emergency use authorization. I think that's true of the military as well. I think some other government agencies. So I think the trigger that this is going to flip is going to be the number of organizations, businesses, cities that will start to require vaccines.
Yeah.
And they'll always provide an out for people who can't do it, right? It's you have to get the vaccine or do something else that would be an alternative to that.
Mm-hmm.
And most people will then choose to get the vaccine. And many parts of our society were reluctant to do that before it had full FDA approval. And that makes sense, right? We shouldn't be using the force of whatever corporations, businesses, municipalities to make people do something if the FDA is still like, we're not totally sure this is safe for human consumption, which is where they were when this was in the case where it was this morning, when we all woke up this morning. The FDA had said it's appropriate to use for an emergency basis, but we're not done analyzing if we think it's absolutely safe for the human population. If that's not what the FDA meant, then it really diminishes the validity of FDA approval. And we should not diminish the validity of FDA approval. Take it seriously. So a lot of us were willing to use it in the experimental stage, even though it was 200 million people and on and on.
Yeah, it's a pretty big test group. So you can get a pretty good idea of whether it's
and
effective
over
and
and
their
over a
side
short period of
effects.
time. To be clear, a lot of times these kinds of medications they'll make them stretch out over multiple years in order to see what the long term effects are, and that's
Hmm.
not we're not good. We don't know that. It's not possible to know that. I think all indications from the people that I listen to on this are saying there aren't going to be any long term effects, like there aren't any short term effects
Hmm.
that are something we should be overly concerned about for the population. So this is a big deal. Today's the day when finally August 23rd, which is really fast considering the fact that this thing just came out in late December of 2020. We're 9 months in. It's sort of
Yeah.
the gestation period of a human being.
Hmm.
So that's a big deal, huh?
Yeah.
Happy Pfizer Day. Happy Pfizer
Happy
approval
Pfizer.
day.
I am Team Pfizer, so I feel good. We're
I am too.
first to official approval.
Yeah. I think when I get my third dose, I think I'm going to stick with Pfizer too. I'm just going to triple down on Pfizer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel good about that, and feel good that now our country at least can start to move forward. I don't know what the implications of this is for global use, but I would imagine the people at Pfizer are watching their value of their company continue to rise. So
Hmm.
this has got to be good news
Yeah.
for those people.
But not everyone's happy about this sort of thing, and that leads to protests. And this is kind of a scary headline that armed protests are now picking up, and new study says they're more likely to turn violent. And I don't know
Yeah.
if this is just like, scary clickbait, but it does seem like there's a new edge to some of the public protests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the advocacy group Every Town has commissioned some research, and it says that when people are armed as protesters, the chance of violence, of all kinds of violence, goes up.
Hmm.
That having a weapon increases a protesters and protest groups' use of violence. Now, these are difficult studies to figure out, right? Like, is it, more violent, like people carry weapons to protests, or does the weapon itself give someone a kind of confidence to me? Regardless of the chicken or the egg as being the originator of this, the thing we know is weapons allow people to behave in ways that they might not be allowed to behave in their own estimation, in ways that are more violent.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the thing, this is the part of culture and about human development that we often don't get into enough in our society. And I'm thinking about it in this way. When I was a kid, the notion that I heard in culture was sort of, if you're angry, if you've got emotion inside of you and you're frustrated, go let it out.
Mm-hmm.
Scream therapy, go to a boxing club, go punch a wall or a door, like do something to sort of get that anger out, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
like it was a cyst that was building, or a pimple that was starting to fill up, and you just got to let it all out and get it out of there, and then it can be gone and you can be freed up from it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still a lot of people who think this, but this was generally how culture talked about things. Like, well, somebody's just got a short fuse, and once that fuse gets lit, then after it explodes, then the person, they're over it, and
Yeah.
and they're fine. So shouting or yelling, or basketball coaches throwing chairs at players across a court, or this kind of nonsense that sort of went on in society and still goes on in society, was talked about as, we just got to let some steam out.
Yeah.
You got to
Let
get
off
it.
some steam. Yeah.
Well, people who've studied all this work on anger know that when someone gives in to anger in an outburst, it increases the likelihood of future feelings of anger and outbursts.
Hmm.
It works the other way. If a person doesn't learn to moderate the emotion that they're feeling away from actions that would be considered by themselves and others to be inappropriate later, they will continue to stay in that pattern. What one has to do is deal with the anger in a way that it doesn't come out in outbursts.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say, go ahead and be angry and let it all out, and then you're over it. What that's doing neurologically is making a pattern that people then continue to stay in that pattern.
Yeah.
So what we know is that the behaviors that we do, that we participate in, reinforce the behaviors that we're going to participate in the future. Brings me to guns. This is why carrying weapons does something to people. And I think, in addition to all the very clear data that there is about the danger of weapons, the internal effect on people who choose to protect themselves by carrying lethal weaponry on their body, in their truck, or keep it in their house, is to start to reinforce a pattern that violence is your protection.
Mm-hmm.
And that in and of itself starts to frame and shape and affect how a person lives. And this is
Yeah.
true, frankly, whether it's in your own house or anybody else. If you hire security, or you do it through you pay your taxes and your municipality does your violence for you. This violence narrative, internally, externally, it just starts to repeat itself. And so when I see things like, armed protests are picking up, and that more people who are armed in protests are more violent, that doesn't surprise me at all. It seems
Yeah.
like totally follows the
Right. Because if
pattern.
you're packing heat, you don't need to be the one to de-escalate the situation, because you view yourself as in control of the situation, as top of the food chain in any given scenario. And so,
And and when you're carrying a weapon in this country, you often have to do some kind of a training for it, right? Not everywhere, but in many
mhm,
places you take gun safety training. Oftentimes that gun safety training teaches you to think about what you will do as an act of violence to keep other people from being violent.
mhm,
It's not just we're not just talking about video games, but I could go on and on about the use of violence in video games and first person shooters games. Like the idea that I know that stuff is, here I go. I know this stuff is not connected one to one, that everybody who plays a video game also plays this stuff
mhm.
out in life, but it creates a mentality and a perspective in society, and it diminishes the um, the sensitivity that we have to gun violence. And it just
Yeah.
there's this new CNN. I watch a lot of CNN. There's a new CNN show coming out in a couple of weeks here, that is on gun violence. I think it's next Sunday,
Hmm.
and it's sort of a CNN film on where we are on gun violence and the NRA and all the rest of this. And it's good that people are keeping up this conversation,
Yeah.
because we have just gone the wrong way. When back in the
Yeah.
70s, there were gun, big pushes to limit weapons. And the weapons that we were talking about in the 70s, the big one, the one that people were worried about, was the Saturday Night Special. Remember the 38
The
caliber
38, yeah.
Saturday Night Special, and they called it the Saturday Night Special because people would take it out on the weekends, and they would use. And there was even a song by I don't know, one of those, some Alabama band, about 38 Special ain't good for nothing but putting a man in his grave. Like there were rock
Yeah.
bands from the South singing about these handguns are a problem. Remember when the whole thing was limiting handguns?
Yeah.
That was the big push. Stop handguns. We have moved so far from handguns. Now it's long rifles and things modeled after AK 40, 57, AK 15s, AK 14,
AK-47s and
AK
yeah.
47s and B 52s. And yeah, I mean, all of these weapons, they've just gotten more and more deadly. We've just gone the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's not only, I mean, concealed carry laws have just been baked in now. People can just do this and just carry
And the
weapons.
wild thing is, like, places like Texas are like, we don't even want to do that. We're going to get rid of, like, you can open carry anywhere. Like that's
Oh,
the world they want to live in. It's like the Wild West, but
yes.
with much more efficient and deadly weapons. I can't fathom it.
And I don't know what's true about the Wild West from the movies and TV shows I've seen, but I seem to remember, maybe it's based on some level of historic fact, that when you came riding into town, you stopped by the sheriff's office and you dropped off your gun. Right? That's what you had to do to go to the bar or the saloon or the hotel or whatever. You you had to have it for all kinds of reasons, living on a horse in the West because of varmints and animals and hunting, whatever you're doing. But then you got around people, you put it away. Now
Mm-hmm.
people are like, no, you get around more people. If there's going to be a bunch of people around, I'm going to pull it out.
Yeah.
It's just
I'm not going to be a soft target.
how we, yeah, again, as if that weapon is somehow a shield.
Yeah.
And in the New Testament, says the preacher, there is a call for us to take up a shield of faith and a weapon of sword, which is the word of the Lord. Trying to even there, they were trying to swap out and put on the boots of peace and the full armor of God. So what you're going to be protected by is not your own weaponry.
Yeah.
And interestingly, our friend Shane Claiborne, about every, I don't know, 6 hours, does a tweet that says something like,
6 hours.
I am stunned again that people of faith say I don't need to get the vaccine because God will protect me from the virus, but I'm going to carry a gun to protect me from other
Yeah.
people. That version of that tweet, fantastic, and really points out something.
Evergreen. Yeah.
Put on the full armor of God and not carry weapons yourself. Put your swords away. I think it's not only a good call for people of Jesus following faiths, but a good call for the humanity
Yeah.
to take upon itself that we'd live that way. And let's just set aside. Okay, so speaking of that, because what else could it look like? Well, it could look like Afghanistan and Kabul. Boy, the firefighting that's now erupting at the airport and the security situation has gotten worse outside the airport, at least overnight. I don't know where it is today. And now that's nighttime there in Afghanistan. I don't know where things are sitting, but when you watch that video of Taliban soldiers, young men, all hopped up on something, walking with little whips in their hands. Have you seen these, Dan? They have
No.
these little whips. So it's like a hard rubber strap, and there's two of them, and it's got a little hand hold in the middle of it, like a little rock or something. And it's not a rock, and you could sort of hold it in your hand, and then between your fingers would come these little whips, and they can snap really quick and sort of hit somebody with them. Just unbelievable. They've just curated this, get people in order kind of snap whip thing. And then they're carrying these long rifles and semi-automatic weapons, military grade stuff from the United States.
Yeah.
They're
Courtesy
carrying it around.
of the red, white, and blue.
And it's terrible there. And the Biden administration has been right on getting us out of Afghanistan. Lo and behold, the Trump administration was right on getting us out of Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
And both administrations have managed this in a way that doesn't make any sense. I don't know where the fault is going to lie, if it's with the military, which is my leaning, or does it lie with the civilian decision makers? But somewhere, this idea that we're going to spend 20 years in a country propping it up, holding it up, patching it together, and then when we pull out finally, think that this is all going to work great. And I know that what the Biden administration was facing was two bad options. One, they start moving everybody out while we still had soldiers there. That could have precipitated the collapse of the Afghan government, or pull out our military and then start to evacuate people after that while the Afghan government is still in shape. And we know what happened was the Afghan government collapsed within 11 days and was gone. Why it ever made sense to think that we would evacuate American citizens and special immigrant visa holders, SIV holders, so these are Afghanis who work for the U.S. government, that we thought that was better to do after we were out and shut down an air base and moved everybody out. I just don't understand. When they 3 weeks ago, when they abandoned that Bagram Air Base, I don't know if you watched the news on that. I watched the reporters just going through, and he's like, now the Afghanis are just running through this place. Like they've just taken over this little city, this air base, which is way outside of Kabul, that has been the center of the American efforts in that part of the country. It just abandoned it.
Yeah.
It seems to me, as somebody who doesn't know about this, but what I've heard, that it would have made more sense to use that air base over the last month to be evacuating out the people we want to get out. And I know that their argument is, and they're probably right, that would have precipitated a collapse. Because here's what would have happened if we had said, move them out, and people had started to move out, and then the Afghan government collapsed, people would have been saying, well, it collapsed
You made
because
it collapse. Yeah.
so there was a this was a no win. But what else was not a win was saying to the American people, we think this is going to go okay. We think we got this. We pretty much
Hmm.
like that. Just
Yeah.
if that's what you thought, you were just dead wrong on it. And Biden has been somebody who has said repeatedly, "I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to give it to you straight from the shoulder." He always says that,
Yeah.
straight from the shoulder. I like that phrase. I like that attitude. I wanted to be straight. It wasn't straight from the shoulder on this one. Like now they're saying, yeah, this was going to be messy. This was going to be dangerous. This was going to take
Yeah.
a long time. We don't know how it's all going to go. That's
We just
not the way
didn't think it would happen so fast. Yeah.
that's not the way we were talking about 6 weeks ago,
Right.
6 years ago. They were
Here's the
talking about
thing, though. There's actually a third option, and it would look like South Korea, where we still have 70,000 troops. I don't think we need to keep that level of presence anywhere in the world. But this idea that we had to get every American soldier out, we don't do that in other countries. So if 2,500 people was going to keep that country in relative stability, I don't know, maybe we do that, Like
yeah, I think what they were calculating, though, and what they'd realized was where we are in South Korea, where we are in Germany, where we are in Poland, these other places, our soldiers are not being threatened by the level of citizen uprising that there is in Afghanistan. I mean, the
mhm,
Taliban over these last 20 years was not wiped out, and were building in strength all over the country, and really did not want the United States military there. The only way they could get permission to be there is to put together a government that really never was supported by the people. So the difference in the way the people of Afghanistan felt about the Afghan government versus the way the Taliban felt about the U.S. military was so different that to have
mhm.
stayed there, we would have been staying there in a conflictual relationship. That's
Sure.
not what the case is anywhere else we are in the world. And so people who make this suggestion would just have to factor in that the United States would have soldiers staying in places where they're under threat from the people who are citizens of that country.
Mhm.
And that was not changing. Like, had that shifted and it became a very cooperative relationship, and the US used Afghanistan as a place where we did operations in that part of the world, that'd be one thing. But that is not the relationship that the citizens of Afghanistan, or that the Taliban, who were increasingly becoming the people that the citizens of Afghanistan were turning to all over the country. That's the part of the story that's not always told as directly,
Mhm.
was that the government was basically functioning in 3 to 5 major metropolitan areas.
Right.
And it was not even one that the US felt it could negotiate with. It didn't have any power. It was corrupt. It was swapping leaders out one after the other. And that army, turns out that army that we said we had there's 300,000 commando trained Afghan soldiers. Now it's coming out, and people have known this all along. There were never 300,000. Some of these people
Yeah, it's just on
leading these,
paper.
yeah, and what they were doing, did you know about this? They were taking some of the commanders were saying, I have 60 soldiers in my command. They actually had 15. They were taking payment for all 60 and keeping it.
Yeah.
There was a kind of corruption that was wink and nudge, and also couldn't be proved out. So there was a state, or these were people that were technically in, but they really weren't doing anything, and they were paid a
Mhm.
fraction of the amount because they didn't have to do anything. So the corruption was just all over. Because all of that was the case, that's why the Trump administration and Mike Pompeo went over there and made the worst deal in the history of deals with the Taliban, to basically say, we'll leave if you won't attack us in the next 9 months. I mean, the fact that Donald Trump and that Mike Pompeo did the worst possible job in the last 4 years with the Taliban, that that's part of what set up Biden. And he certainly could have clued everybody in on that, and certainly could have said, hey, we need to have a different approach going forward, because the situation in Afghanistan is so deteriorated. We're not going to be able to get everybody out by September 11th. But Trump wanted them out by re-election day because he wanted the benefit of it. And Biden wanted them out by September 11th. And that idea that we were going to set I'm not saying we shouldn't set dates. Some people complain about that. But we shouldn't set dates just because the date has other meaning to it.
Yeah.
And here I am.
Yeah, it's
know.
a mess. It's a mess.
I'm reading this. I'm reading the chats, and people say such good things.
But here's the other thing is, it looks like a total collapse of the military. And one can make the conclusion that there was never any investment from the citizenry to defend their own country and retake it from the Taliban. But 60,000 Afghan army personnel died trying to get rid of the Taliban.
Yes.
And so there was a strong contingent that wanted a different future for their country and gave their lives to do so. But then the machine was too big. It was too propped up by our military. And so when we pulled out, there was just no way for them to succeed.
Yeah, and I'm not an Afghan expert, so I'm just, repeating things. My understanding is Afghanistan is less a formalized country with a sense of identity that's built around being Afghani. There are some for whom that's their view, but Afghanistan is closer to a coalition of tribal groups.
Mm-hmm.
That these are people groups that live nearby one another, and that Afghanistan was created after World War I, like a lot of the Middle East, by arbitrary decisions.
Yeah, we just have to have borders to call this a country.
And yes,
and here they are now. Get along.
Yeah, and so I don't know how many there are, but you put a group of those different tribal identities together, and one of the identities is an Afghan identity. Those people then were fighting against the others. But what the Taliban was doing was working in the areas where people had another identity that was more ethnic and more tribal, and then had the Taliban perspective as a way of being in the world, not a nationalist narrative of being citizens of this country.
Mm-hmm.
So that's more common around the world than we might know of. There's people even describe that in the United States. The United States is better described that way. But that's part of what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Well, hopefully we at least learn some lessons from this. I'm not confident we will, but I'm hopeful that we maybe we shouldn't try to fix everything with the military by bombing everything.
I read a book a few years ago. I'm missing the title of it now, but basically the premise of the book is about decision making and how closed systems get created and people are unable to make good decisions. And two big illustrations in the book was NFL football coaches and the military. One of the examples with the NFL was that the way you become a coach in the NFL at the head coaching level is you move up through the ranks. And the way you move up through the ranks is to be in the tutelage of some other coach. Then you become a defensive or offensive coordinator, and then someone picks you and you sort of get moved on. So what happens is there becomes a groupthink inside of head coaches because they all come through the same system. Mm-hmm. And the big illustration was the number of times that a football team should go for first down on their fourth down try. So go for it on fourth down, don't punt. And the story is that statistically speaking, if it's under 4 yards, so 3 point anything, you should go for it. You will get first down more often than for benefit than you would by punting the ball and getting a return and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So anything under four yards, you go for it. Statistically, totally provable. The number of times coaches will go for it, 4% of the time.
Yeah.
Because coaches are taught, and the coach's own mentality of not making it when you try for fourth down. We've created this ethos that's so important in football that you not fail at trying to get a first down on fourth down, that it creates such morale, discontent in the coaching staff. that they won't do it. So this book's story is, this is what goes on in decision making. It's not. And the other example is the military, that the way you become a decision maker in the military is that you come up through the ranks by being someone who follows the conventional thinking. So not only do we not learn, the system is designed to not learn.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're doing again in Afghanistan looks like all the other times and places until this very moment. These same military leaders will talk about this as if with a couple of adjustments, this would have worked. Like, there is just no recognition that the whole thing has to be rethought. And that's why some people are so bothered by the fact that our defense secretaries are now increasingly people coming from the military brass. There were supposed to be civilian leadership over the military to try to give it some credence. So I have just zero confidence in any of our systems, but especially of the more top down, do as you're told, follow the rules, execute what you're asked to execute. Those systems, the least good at learning anything or making any new behavior change for the future. It's
a closed loop.
A closed loop. That's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
Dan, Mike raises a really good question, saying that how could previous U.S. administrations have a peace deal with the Taliban and not include the Afghan administration in their negotiations? Mike, I mean, this is the question that when this came up and people started to notice that the Trump administration was negotiating with the Taliban, and that picture of Mike Pompeo in the room signing the document with the Taliban leaders, and Donald Trump wanting the Taliban to come to the United States last September 11th to be at Camp David with him on the 20th to announce this big deal. The fact that the Afghan government wasn't included in those negotiations was the indication that the State Department and the U.S. government had said, there's no one to negotiate with.
Yeah, they'd already given up. Yeah, totally.
So then they gave up on fighting for their own for their own government after we gave up. Of course they did. But these are the things that were just so broken. And I believe that it was these other commitments that caused our own decision makers to make the decisions that they did.
Yeah.
So, Mike, I think that's exactly the point that needs to be made. All right, let's skip Matt Gaetz for now, other than the fact that Matt Gaetz is, just a mess. Yeah. We'll talk about Matt Gaetz some other time, but
probably tomorrow on the politics show.
Yeah, we will. There we go. See us tomorrow for 6 minutes on Matt Gaetz, insurrectionist, trafficker in human trafficking, and newlywed and congressman. So wow, what a deal this guy is. But on a lighter note, going out on this, what is Jeopardy? What is Jeopardy's host? Well, it seems that the Mike Richards, who was announced and named the new host to take over for Alex Trebek permanently, who was one of the producers of the show, he and Mayim Balik, am I saying her name right? Balik?
Maybe.
Balik. I don't know who she is, but she's someone that's known. I think she's a comedian and somebody else. We're going to co-host. He was going to do the regular daily shows, and she was going to do all the specials. Well, a bunch of uprising, a bunch of shaking of fists, a bunch of people saying about the daytime game show. No way, Mike Richards, you're not going to be the host. So he stepped down. Now, my guesses are going to go back to LeVar Burton. Do you know this, that he was in for it? Reading Rainbow Guy.
How did they not go with LeVar Burton?
Racism was is the number one answer for $500. And that's what everyone is saying, right? Is they're saying that the
what
people
is racism?
The people who watch. Yes, I missed that joke perfectly. What is racism?
Form of question, Doug.
Meaning the people who watch Jeopardy are people who would be more comfortable with a Mike Richards than they would with a LeVar Burton.
Well, what's convenient in this whole situation, too, is
Ridiculous.
Mike Richards was the executive producer and just sort of named himself as, like, he's got kind of an in with who gets the job. He's like, you know what? After some consideration, I think I'm the best person to take on the mantle.
That's one of those things. I got up in the morning when the day was to make this decision, and I looked myself in the mirror and thought, hey, what are you doing?
You're the guy.
apparently had filled in sometimes. He says he didn't have anything to do with it. Other people in their world did the picking. Uh, but just bad for all those reasons. I mean, but again, kind of who cares? This is somebody hosting a TV show. But
Turns
it
out
does
people
point,
care.
does point to some other larger issues, including this one, insider dealing like this, right? That he picks himself, and his own reputation for his behavior, apparently connected to these other shows that he was involved in, is that he is not a man that is honorable, and was just torn up in all kinds of scandal, all kinds of treating women badly, and issues that are often referred to as Me Too moments. All of this stuff, just
anti-Semitic, racist.
Get rid of people like this. Like, just.
Well, and he's still the executive producer. He's like, he said, I'm not going to host, but he's still running the show. Like,
oh yeah, and there's just a lot of jeopardy here. There's a lot in jeopardy.
Yeah,
it's my Jeopardy joke. All right, that's that. Hey, thanks for sticking along today. Nice to have all of you here with us, Barbara and John and Mike. I'm just going to sort of name off people: Trisha, Jim, of course, Flo. Did I mention Ariella? Am I getting everybody? Florin, good to see you. Yeah, all of you, thanks for chipping in. If you're chiming in, if you're somebody who is, and thanks for chipping in too. If you haven't yet chipped in, go over to votecommon.good.com or greaterthings.org and make a contribution. Chip in a little bit. We'd love to have a little bit of your money for what we're doing, including when we're going to be telling the story of what's happening along the border. In fact, we're launching today, a little later today. If you're on our email list, if you're not on our email list and you listen to this, please get on the email list. And then read this email that comes out today, tomorrow, Wednesday. You're going to get a few of them that allow you to chip in per mile. So you can make a per mile donation. And we'll do little check-ins every day with electronics on how far we've ridden that day. And say you want to give a penny a mile. Say you want to give a dime a mile. Maybe a quarter, maybe $1. I don't know, $100. Maybe we're gonna ride 3,600 miles. Maybe you want to give $100 a mile. It seems like a lot, but we appreciate it, and would gladly take your $36,000 for that, or your $306, or your $36, or your $3.60. I don't know. We'll take any version of it. So we'd love to see you do that. And if you want to stick with us and come with us, you can do that. You can come along. You can virtually ride. Find all this over at wethepeopleride.org. And track along. And hey, by the way, I'll talk about this some tomorrow. If you have not yet watched the Netflix documentary series, 6 episodes, I think it is, Immigration Nation, you should go watch it. It's incredible. Watched episode 1 last night. It's an hour long, maybe just under an hour. Multiple times I had to push pause, look up at the ceiling, breathe deeply, and try to find ways to deal with my anger that were not in outbursts. I was just trying to rewire my neural pattern behaviors when I'm losing my mind.
Got to switch between that and Mr. Rogers. Just what do you do with the mad that you feel?
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to watch episode 2 tonight. That's what I'm going to do with the mad that I feel. It's incredible. Please watch it. And then we're making a documentary about our ride, and you can watch that one in 2 years. But between now and then, watch Immigration Nation. It's incredible. It's incredible. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. And we will see you tomorrow, where we're going to be talking about, I'm glad Peggy watched it. Peggy, let me know what you thought of it. We'll see you tomorrow. We talk about politics. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be talking about faith with Dominique Gilliard's new book that is out. So lots of things coming up this week, and we will see you tomorrow.
Bye, everybody.